Hey there, this is Christiana from the Well-Behaved Wallet. Thank you so much for watching. Here are my top tips for how to save money. These are tips you're going to be able to implement right now. They don't take a ton of money. They don't take a lot of planning. These are things you can do from your own home and implement into your budget and money managing strategy right now, today, this very moment. Tip number one is a mindset shift, and I credit Dave Ramsey with this one. He said that people who are successful with money and people who have gotten out of debt and stayed out of debt and managed to build wealth all have the same thing in common, and that is extreme, radical senses of contentment with where they are, but a desire to move forward. So that contentment is very, very critical in creating margin and room to save, because if you're content, you're not looking for random things and buying random stuff to fill this gaping hole and this sort of consumerist need. So tip number one is that cultivating a mindset of contentment will allow you to save and to build more. Tip number two is also a mindset shift, and that is to adjust your level of living and your needs and wants to be below your income. Somewhere like this. This is also very difficult because sometimes we've all heard that lifestyle creep kind of starts to slowly go up. You get a raise, you raise your lifestyle ever so slowly, and it's kind of like that analogy of if you put a frog in boiling water, it jumps out because it knows there's danger, but if you put a frog in lukewarm water, room temperature water, and you slowly turn up the heat, it doesn't even know that it's boiling to death. So that would be tip number two, and that takes a little bit more strategy to implement. But if you start in your mind getting used to this idea of living slightly below where your income or your savings or your holdings place you, then that puts you on a much more solid foundation to be able to save more. So here's kind of my suggestion and my take on that. If you're in a position where you feel like you're not able to get any breathing room and you can't get ahead, that's kind of an indication that your needs and your wants are outpacing your income. So if your income's here and your needs and your wants are here, you don't have very much breathing room. And the challenge is to very slowly start to overcome that. That process of adjusting your living to be below your income is a little bit longer, where you can start immediately. It does take a little bit more planning and strategy, and that's basically what my whole channel is designed to explore. That's what my whole channel is about. So that process is ongoing and kind of a day-to-day kind of a thing, but you can absolutely start right now for free from the comfort of your own home. Tip number three is to know what you already have. So if you do have some extra time at home, I don't know, say if you're like in quarantine or in self-isolation or something, it's a perfect time to go through your house and to take inventory of what you already had. So I'll give you an example of what this looked like in my life recently. I am in the habit of doing that for grocery shopping. I start by looking in my fridge and in my pantry to see what I already have open and kind of on the schedule to be eaten, and then I shop accordingly. We've all had that experience when you're like, oh, should I get milk? I don't know. Do I have milk at home? I don't know. And you end up with like 3 cartons of milk because you can't remember if you have milk at home already. So to just kind of circumvent that, look at what you already have, make it a habit to look at what you already have first. This can extend to other areas besides just your grocery shopping. And in fact, that's one of the best ways to save money. So what I've been doing lately is going through each room in the house and taking an inventory. So one of my favorite things to buy are things like stationery and office supplies and stuff like that, like notebooks. Like, I love me a good notebook. So I find that I buy a bunch of them and I will stockpile them and have a whole bunch that I haven't used. So I uncovered recently a giant stockpile of notebooks that I didn't even know that I had. And for me, I feel like that was a cost savings because I'm good for notebooks for a while, you know, I'm good. So that's tip number three, is to know what you already have. Tip number four is to be really clear in the difference between a need and a want. So a need is a necessity, something like food or clothing to cover your body, or fuel for your car, lights, water, electricity, a roof over your head. These are basic needs. Wants are things like new clothes, fancy name brand food, other things that aren't necessities. Other things that aren't necessarily necessities for your day-to-day life. It takes good skill to be able to discipline yourself to tell the difference between a need and a want. So a helpful trick that I actually started doing when I go out shopping to tell the difference between a need and a want is to shop with my phone. So if I find something that I think I might want, I'll take a picture of it, grab the price, remember what store I'm in, and then I'll think about it for 24 hours. So I feel like giving myself that sort of buffer window of 24 hours is super helpful. So I try to put off purchases for as long as possible, but then I'll go back and I'll look at the pictures on my phone and be like, do I think this item would add $21.95 worth of enjoyment to my life? Do I feel like it would lengthen the life of other things in my house? And if the answer is yes, then I'll go back to that store and purchase it. And then by that time, it's moved its way up from a want to maybe a need. Can I buy it somewhere else cheaper? That'll also give me some more time to kind of consider if it's worth getting or not. More on that later. Tip number 5 is to get the best price possible. So I divide these into 2 different categories. So they're the items that you buy on the regular, things like your groceries, your consumables, things like that. And then there are the bigger ticket items that you might only buy once in a while, once every couple of years, once every few months, and you want to also look for good prices on both of those. So I'll give you an example for both categories. So in the buy every few months or every couple of years category, I needed a new fan for our laundry room because it tends to get really stale and we like to keep the air moving. And what that does is lengthen the life of other appliances. It makes the room more comfortable. So having a fan down there is almost a necessity at this point to preserve the integrity of the space, really. So our fan was on the fritz, so we needed a new one. And I was walking around Walmart and I came across a giant end cap display of giant stand fans for $21.95. And I was like, interesting, I need one of those. Thinking about it, I was like, I do need one of those, but is this necessarily the best price that I could pay? So I took a picture of it, I saved that in my phone, and I came home, did a little research, and I'm like, do I need this? How much would it, where can I find a better price for this? And that's always my question is, can I get this for a better price? Can I buy it used somewhere? Is there something that I could borrow it from? So I'm always thinking, is this the absolute best deal that I could get? So jury's still out on the fan. It's a little bit cooler now in the Northeast, so I don't need it immediately. That's another thing. I put it off for a little bit, but I'm going to have to make a decision soon. And I know that asking myself, is this the best price, is going to be a huge help in that process. On the consumable side, the day-to-day kind of things like your groceries, your toiletries, your household cleaners, things like that. It's important to know the prices at the different stores, but I've found that I can drive myself crazy going from place to place, and especially now when things might not always be in stock, it can be a little bit crazy making. So what I've typically done is I have a loop that I follow, and I get the items that I'm reasonably sure will be in stock at different stores, and then if I find other things there, great, I'll pick them up as I can get them. I don't drive myself crazy for 5 or 10 cents. That's a big thing. It's just not worth the time, money cost. Tip number 6 is to think long term. So I kind of ask myself when I buy things or if I have a bigger purchase on the horizon, will I still love this item in a year? Will I still need this item in a year? Will this item add to my happiness in a year? Do I even think it's going to be around? Am I even going to remember? And a good way to test this out is to think about items that you've bought a year, 2 years, 3 years in the past and see if you remember any of them. Because if you think about it, those items that you bought back then were all things that you wanted or you had a longing or a craving for at that point. Think about the happiness that they've brought you and then fast forward and try to think long term from where you are presently. Is that item that you're considering buying going to add that much value and pleasure to your life? Think about it. Tip number 7 is to ask to borrow first. This is a big one, and I actually just started doing this, and I'm really careful. I try to be a very good steward of other people's items, but it's really worked out well for me in the past. So what I wanted to do was build a tripod. I have a video on that actually, and I'll link it if I can find it. It was an ultimate fail, so I'm actually glad that I didn't spend a whole lot of money on this. It started out as a cost-saving measure. It did not really work out that way, but I wanted a drill, and like a hand drill. And I figured I would not be using it a whole lot in the future. So I turned to one of my handy mail friends and I asked if he had anything that I could borrow. And he actually did. And it was a great tool. And I was really excited that he was able to kind of show me how to use it and stuff. And I felt very privileged to have borrowed it from him and also get kind of that tutorial in the process. Like I mentioned, the project was a fail, but definitely grateful that I didn't have to spend more money than necessary on that project. So whenever possible, if you can plan ahead and ask to borrow rather than paying for it yourself, maybe you can also return the favor, like send back some homemade zucchini bread with that item that you borrowed, or I don't know, something like that. It should always be a two-way street. Tip number 8 is to buy used when possible. A lot of times older items are even better made than some of the newer items, and there's no reason to buy new when an older item that might be a little bit less expensive would do the job just as well. I drive a 2004 Toyota Camry and I love that car, and it does the job for me absolutely perfectly fine. So whenever possible, investigate the possibility of buying something used. Tip number 9, stretch it out, make it last. So this for sure comes from the Depression era thinking of use it up, make it do, or do without. That kind of idea of making things last as absolutely long as possible. So I do that with things like hand soap and cleaning detergent, liquid like that, anything that I can kind of prolong the life of. This all goes to being a good steward of your items as well. Taking care of the things that you have will make them last longer and ultimately in the long term end up saving you money. Item number 10 is fix it. If you can, fix it. If it needs to be fixed, fix it. Do what you can to fix something rather than buying completely new. This goes especially for things like clothing. If you can mend something rather than buying an entirely new item, you will end up saving money in the long term as well. Sometimes it's not worth it. Sometimes it doesn't work, and I fully acknowledge that. Case in point, that fan in the laundry room, yeah, we tried to fix it. In fact, my mother, God bless her, spent a long time like cleaning it out because it just stopped working randomly. We thought it could be because the blades were dirty, because something needed to be like oiled or something. So she spent a long time cleaning out the blades, cleaning out the wire, and it didn't work. It's still not working. So fully acknowledge that sometimes you won't always be able to fix things and make them work again, but it's always worth a try. Item number 11 is to make a list. I am a huge fan of list making. For me, it just makes me feel more stable and calm to have a list of everything I need. But I've noticed that it also works really well psychologically, because that way you're primed for what you need rather than being susceptible to all the other influences that come in to try to take you off course, especially when going grocery shopping. When you go into any type of store, there are hundreds of millions of dollars that are put into making you buy certain things. So if you go out there without a list, unprepared, then you're a sitting duck, man. You are liable to be hit with whatever advertising scheme comes your way. You'll end up throwing random crap in your cart and walk out and not even know why you bought what you bought or what you bought. That's why I'm a huge fan of going into any type of store for anything with a list. Doesn't matter how big or how small. I come in with a list so that I am prepared against anything else, any other influences that might come and try to sway me to spend more than I need to spend on what exactly I need to spend it on. So a list will prepare you and insulate you against attacks from big marketing. Tip number 12 is to appreciate the things that money can't buy. For me, things that bring me joy are noticing the beauty in the world around me. And that could be something as simple as the sun in the morning, or the sound of rain on a roof, or just the feeling of being warm in bed. I just love like curling up in bed. Things like that are things that money can't buy. And the more you appreciate them, the more content you'll be. And that ultimately will help you save money. And that's the number one money saving tip that I can give you, is to be content with the things that money can't buy. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you will keep watching. Bye.